2016. As I step on the stage of Santa Rosa Toastmasters Club 182 to deliver my intro icebreaker speech, I'm a little bit nervous. I have practiced this 47 times using rote memorization over 2 or 3 or 4 hours, because that's how you do it. As I step on the stage, I'm thinking to myself, if I don't know it now, I'll never know it. And so I launch in, and I do my introduction, and it goes pretty well. Yes, feeling good. I get to through my first point, also going well. Yes, I'm rounding second base as I do the next point. Yes, and finally, I'm doing my third point, and it happens. Telephone goes off. It's somebody in the fourth row, somebody like you, sir. And I'm a little bit flustered. And so I glare at him. I scowl at him. And suddenly, when I turn my attention back to the crowd, I realize my speech is gone. It's evaporated into thin air. And I'm a little bit desperate. And so I close my eyes, and I'm thinking of my outline that I've written that day. Thinking, I'm sure that I can remember it, but I can't because it's just words on a page. And so I kind of panic, and I cobble together some sort of meek ending that's pretty lame, and I slink off the stage. And as I'm walking along the stage, I start to hear that old familiar voice. Stupid Dave, you have such a bad memory. You're so dumb. You never should have done this. You should quit Toastmasters right now and save yourself the humiliation. Raise your hand if you've ever felt that way. Keep your hand up if you've ever heard negative voices like that before. I was ready to quit. I was on the verge. Because why would I want to go through such humiliation? But I didn't, even though I have suffered with a bad memory my entire life. So much so that I have avoided certain challenges. I avoided Toastmasters for years. Raise your hand if you ever avoided Toastmasters for years. Exactly. I avoided for that. I avoided certain professions like law. How could I possibly memorize everything that there is in law? No way. Academia and journalism, all these memory-intensive professions. I just said, no way, I can't do it because I've always had struggle with memory. But I am stubborn as a mule, and I'm not going to give up this time. So a month later, I step back on the stage. I have practiced this new speech 57 times. And it's taken me 4 hours of practice, but I'm ready. And I get on the stage, I deliver my speech, and it happens again. I space out, I lose my way, I'm lost, I can't remember the speech, I slink back off the stage, and I hear that speech, that voice, that stupid Dave voice. A month later, stubborn as a mule. Who here is stubborn as a mule? I do it again, I get on the stage, and it happens again. The third time is a charm. And now I'm ready to quit. Why wouldn't I? However, I still have hope. And so I decide, figuring I'm not the only one who has ever had this happen, I do a little bit of research. And I consult my best friend, Google. And what I learned is that this brute rote memorization is an outdated technique that doesn't work with the way our minds work. Because our brains were not really set up for this information age, were they? Who really is set up to memorize passwords and names of people at cocktail parties? Yeah. In fact, our brains were shaped 10,000 to 100,000 years ago during the caveman era. And in that era, all we had to worry about was, where's the cave, of course? Where is the best place to hunt? Where is the best place to gather? Is this plant edible or poisonous? That kind of thing. It's all places and locations. Places and locations. That's how our minds were shaped and formed, and yet we're trying to do all sorts of things that are contrary to the way our brains are wired. The Greeks and the Romans understood this 2,000 years ago because they too had caveman brains. Of course they did. Brains haven't changed at all in all these years. So they developed a method, which is what we're going to talk about. And it's called the method of loci, loci like location, or simply the memory palace, the memory palace. 2,000-year-old method by the Greeks and Romans who were in the age of oratory. They had to give long speeches, and they couldn't do it from memory. So what is the memory palace? It is a technique for creating a space in your brain and then walking through that space during your speech. And I'm actually doing that right now. A part of my attention right now is in my home office, and I'm looking at things in my office. It's making me a little schizophrenic, but it works. So you create a space in your brain, and then you populate it with images from your speech. In essence, you are taking your speech points and you're turning them into 3D objects that you can easily remember with your caveman brain. Kind of like if they were sculptures and you're walking through a gallery, encountering each of your speech points as you are talking. This is what I'm doing right now. So before we get into exactly how it's structured, because I played around with it a lot, and there's some ways that you can structure it so that it really works well. But before we do that, we have to talk about what is an effective, memorable image. Because if you've got a kind of a hazy, so-so image, you're not going to be able to remember it easily. So images have to be constructed very carefully. And I know probably some of you are thinking, I'm not very creative about this, but you get better at it. Get better at it. I'll go into that. So we have to create a creative, spectacularly vivid, memorable image. So let's practice for a second. Now the thing about speeches is, they are not, they're kind of abstract, aren't they? When you're talking about abstract concepts, point one is kind of abstract and so on, particularly if it's a keynote speech. You're trying to motivate people. So how do you take an abstract image and turn it into, or an abstract idea and turn it into an image that you will never forget? Let's try one. Let's say, for example, the first point in your speech is anticipation. Anticipation. What comes to mind when you think of anticipation? Yes?
The song by Carly Simon.
That song by Carly Simon. Terrific. Anybody else?
Christmas.
Christmas. Do you remember that song by Carly Simon? It was tied to a ketchup commercial at one time? Anybody remember that?
Yes.
Right, because ketchup takes so long to come out. So these are great. They're taking anticipation and turning it into an image. For me, anticipation is a little bit too abstract just to look at it as one big concept. So I would break it into syllables. You can almost always break something into syllables to remember it easier. Anticipation, 5 syllables. I'm only going to do 2. Ant, or anti, and sip. Anti and sip. Now, you can even think of your nice auntie wearing, I don't know, a shawl, and that's okay. But we need to go a little bit crazy. So when I think about anticipation, I'm thinking of a giant ant, like the insect. And it's shaped like this. Because that's how ants are shaped. It's a beautiful ant, woman ant, in a pink negligee. And she is waiting by the door of the house. It's a green door. And she's waiting by that door for her husband to come home, because she is anticipating a night of amour. In preparation, she has taken some glasses of champagne, and she is sipping them. She has put champagne into the glasses, and she's sipping them. Sip, right? Anti and sip. And she sips them here. She's got about 8 arms, right? So sip, 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 sip. She spills the champagne all over herself. She falls down, slips and falls down on the ground, and her arms and legs get wrapped up and tied up like a pretzel. It's a pretty elaborate image. But will you ever forget that? Do you want to forget that? So I've just taken anticipation and turned it into a bright and shiny, unforgettable image. I hope you agree. What was memorable about that image? What made that image memorable?
Color.
The color, yes, thank you. What else?
The weirdness.
The number of hands, yes, that was kind of bizarre.
The weirdness.
The weirdness of it. What else?
Female?
The fact it was female, absolutely. I could have been.
The different arms that she's sipping the drinks with.
The different arms that she's serving the drink.
The color.
The color? Yeah, that was mentioned. That's great. A memorable image has all of these things. It stimulates the senses. particularly sight, because we're doing a memory palace. It has action and movement. I didn't just have that ant standing there. I had that ant doing something with her arms and then falling down. The violent action of falling down makes it feel much more memorable. And I broke in anticipation into something that's very memorable. The green door, the pink negligee. All those details make it memorable. And you can discard them later once you've memorized it. But initially, you want to be able to memorize an image so that it's unforgettable. And that's what we're going to do. Now it is your turn. I'd like you all, working with a partner, to memorize the word cooperation. You're going to create an image of the word cooperation, and you're going to tie it to a location in a room. In this case, a couch, or excuse me, a sofa. A sofa. So cooperation, sofa. You're going to create an image together with a partner that is extremely vivid, that has colors and movement and so on. I will also add, maybe, like I said, a little bit of violent action. This is why Quentin Tarantino's movies are so popular. You may also want to add something that's crazy, funny, or weird. And if you can add a supermodel or Channing Tatum from Mad Max or from Magic Mike, that will make it even more memorable, because sex sells. It also helps you remember. Sex and violence, there's a reason. Great thing is you never have to share your images with anybody. But today you do. You're going to co-create an image. So find a partner and create an image over the next 2 minutes of cooperation on a sofa. All right, give it a shot.
So operation is like an operation.
I'd love to hear some of your images. And if you don't mind, perhaps I can add a polishing point to each one as I hear it. Just because I've been doing this for a long while. Who here would like to share? Oh, well, here right now. Can't wait. Can you stand up so everybody can hear?
Oh, sure. I'm Kent from FAT Toastmasters in Newark. We broke it down, as you suggested, into 3 different parts. We thought of 2 people. Operation, we thought of a doctor and a nurse that are playing doctor. The nurse is in a skimpy candy stripe outfit, and the doctor's in a white outfit. So they're both wearing white, and they're on a red velvet sofa, and they're playing doctor.
There it is. Wow. Terrific. I can't think of any improvement to that. That's terrific.
Followed your rule.
Yeah.
It was perfect. Terrific.
I had a question.
Yes.
How does the doctor and the nurse on the sofa remind you of the word operation?
Oh, the doctor for the operation. Sorry, yeah, I didn't tie that in there. I guess that's the game they're playing. They're playing doctor, but it's an operation.
That's exactly the kind of question that you want to ask yourself.
Right.
Is this going to help me remember operation, or am I going to get caught in the weeds about doctors, playing doctor?
Right.
But it's great, though. I think it's terrific. As long as it helps you remember, it doesn't matter. But I do agree with you. If there had been maybe some scalpels or things, that would even have cemented it more. Who else would like to share their image? Yes, please.
So we also went with the code with being 2, and we have a purple couch, and Channing Tatum and I are playing the game Operation. Things get steamy, and he is now shirtless. So
This isn't That's great.
that will
Wonderful.
stick with me for.
I like it. This isn't going to throw you off during your speech, is it? You just break into a sweat, and it's like, well, if you only knew what was happening in my memory palace. I love it. That's great. Anybody else? Yes.
Trish and I were thinking of the word coop. So we walk in the front door of the house, and there on our sofa is a coop. It's a beautiful gilded coop. And chicken coop. Inside of the coop are chickens, and they are filthy. They're just like getting poop all over the sofa. And they're doing an operation. One is dressed as a doctor and has arms, and the other chicken is cut open.
Oh my God.
And operation.
Wonderful. I might add, if you could have blood flying everywhere, that also will help. Chicken blood. So hopefully you're starting to get a better idea of how to create a memorable image. We still need to do something with it. We're still a long ways from the promised land of remembering a speech from start to finish without using any notes. That's the goal. So here's how the memory palace ties in. The memory palace is a location in your mind that is very familiar to you. Very familiar. It could be a room. It actually could be your entire house that you live in right now. It could be an apartment that you lived in. It could be your childhood home. Could be your route from home to work. Anything that you are very familiar with that has many landmarks that you could remember for the end of time. That's going to be the basis of your memory palace. And this can change all the time. Sometimes I use my childhood home. Sometimes I use my current apartment. Sometimes if I do it clockwise one time, the next time I do it counterclockwise. Sometimes I choose different landmarks. But I use these same ones again and again because they're familiar. Within your memory palace, you're going to create images from your content and put them in the rooms. And do it in a very structured way. What I like to do is take my very first point and dedicate it to one room. So let's say it was, what I used before? Anticipation. So maybe I put anticipation in the living room. And not just in the living room. You could have it in the living room. You could have the aunt dancing around. I like to put it in the doorway, in my mental doorway. So I think of my living room, and I put my first point in the doorway. And that's going to be where it lives. And then when I want to make subpoints to support my argument, my first point, I just move around that room, the living room, until I'm finished. When I leave the living room, I move on to another room. And there is a definite image associated with that next room. And then the next one. And you go around there. By the time you leave that room, you have finished that point. And then you go to the third room. In this way, 5 rooms is kind of ideal because you've got an introduction room, first point room, second point room, third point room, and then conclusion room. But you can also combine if you don't have that larger place. How many people have 5 rooms? Now, bathrooms count. Absolutely. Anything can count. A garage can count. Sometimes I did a whole speech once where it was just a driveway up to my front door. It's okay. So let me give you an example. These things are so abstract until you give an example. So imagine that you are giving a speech about why seniors should, or not, why seniors, how seniors can enjoy their golden years. How they can enjoy their retirement and their golden years. And you're thinking, okay, what are the main points? The first point is, they get a pet. Why not? You get a pet, and there's actually, and I can break that down on why a pet is helpful for seniors in enjoying their senior years. The second point is, they need to do brain work. They need to work their brains. And the third point is, they need to get a hobby, some kind of a hobby. So each of these is going to have its own room. I'll actually act it out. Room 1 is the office. And in the office, you're going to put a pet in the doorway. Room 2 is the living room, and you're going to put a brain in the doorway. And room 3 is the kitchen, and in the kitchen, you're going to put a hobby horse. Don't remember what a hobby horse is? Kind of. So those are the 3 images. I know that when I push past my pet, I am now going to be spending some time on my first point. And then when I leave that room and push past the brain, I'm now going to be doing my second point. And then when I imagine myself walking down the hallway and pushing past the hobby horse into the kitchen, I'm now on point number 3. And if you get lost, you can just think to yourself, where am I in my house? Not so hard. Let's actually have some fun with this. What would be a good image of a pet in a doorway of an office?
A bat.
What's that?
A bat?
A bat. There's a bat in the doorway. I like it. And it's flittering around, right?
It's hanging upside down.
And it's hanging upside down, and it actually talks to you and says, hey, come into my office. I don't know. What else? A pet in the doorway.
A bird in a cage.
A bird in a cage. Great. What else?
A dog.
A dog. And what is the dog doing?
Waiting for you to come home.
He's waiting for me to come home. He's not treating it as a fire hydrant, hopefully. That happens. Although that would be memorable. How about a brain? A brain in the doorway of your living room. What's an image for that?
Spock's brain on a Bowflex.
A brain on a Bowflex, I like that. A brain on a TV. Great. And how about the final one? A hobby horse in the kitchen doorway. What's an image of a hobby horse in a kitchen?
Kid?
Maybe there's a kid on it? I don't know. All you have to do is have these place markers and you won't be able to forget it. Your speech is already laying itself out in a 3D visual way. But the subpoints are very important, right? That's where the juice of this is. It's easy enough to remember your main points. Most of us don't remember our 3 main points. Don't forget our 3 main points. But we do forget all the little details that go into it. So let's break this down. First one was what?
Pet.
Pet. And it's in where?
The doorway.
Office. It's in the office. So in my office, we have a number of different landmarks, and you can choose whatever landmarks you like. The first landmark in my office is a step ladder. It's got 3 rungs on the step ladder. And my first point about pets is that pets give you companionship. If you're a senior and you have a pet, it will be companionship. That's kind of a hard word, companionship, and it's kind of a little abstract. So I'm going to break it into syllables and I'm going to attach it to the ladder so that I don't forget it. So the ladder, let's see, let's come up with something. You've got a ladder, and at the top of the ladder is a giant comma, kind of like a punctuation mark, a giant comma, and it's sitting. It's got arms and legs, of course, and it's sitting at the top of the ladder. On the second rung is a frying pan. Good, pan, good. And it's a giant wok with boiling, scalding oil, heated to the highest degree. And on the third rung, just below that, is a giant ship, a wooden ship, kind of a pirate ship. And it's got little tiny pirates with black beards on it. Now here's what happens. The comma slips off the top rung, falls down into the pan, and the pan burns him. He tips over the fry pan, and the oil drips down to the wooden ship, and it bursts into flame. And the pirates all jump off saying, "Oh no!" And they jump off. It's an elaborate image, but I've just broken companionship into something I will never forget. And as I walk into my room, in my mind, I push past the pet, and I walk in, I see the ladder, I will remember these images, and I will remember companionship. Boom, I've got it. And I will never forget it. Ladder, comma, companionship, I've got the first point. And usually, even if you forget it, you'll just keep on thinking, what was the image for that ladder? What was the image for that ladder? And eventually you'll get it, and you've got companionship. The next thing in my office is what I like to call a kitty condo. You know what a kitty condo is? It's like one of those kitty climbing structures. It's carpeted, and cats like this. This is going to match up with the concept of exercise, because having a pet gives seniors excellent exercise. So what am I going to do with that kitty condo? I'm going to use my cat, Ava, who is a 20-pound Maine Coon cat. She's in red and gold spandex, and she's doing jumping jacks. And she's so heavy, got to give action, right? She's so heavy that the whole thing collapses. She lands on the ground like a gymnast. She sticks the landing, and she goes, ta-da! Meow. That's the important part for me. So when I look at that kitty condo, I am remembering exercise. I've got it. I can't possibly forget it. Further on, the third point about pets is they are excellent stress release. Well, that's a little harder. Stress release. How do you remember that? So I'm thinking to myself, I'm not even thinking. In my office, there is a giant inflatable palm tree given to me by my girlfriend. Giant inflatable palm tree. So I'm imagining what would be good for relating that to stress release. And so I think, how about a giant? And the giant is squeezing it like one of those stress release balls. He's squeezing that palm tree, and then of course you have to have the action, which is that coconuts go flying everywhere, all around the room. And one of them smacks the giant in the nose, and blood comes gushing out of his nose. Yuck. But it's memorable. Here I am in my office. My first speech, I think of the ladder. I've got the image, companionship. And then I move my mind clockwise around the room. I like clockwise for some reason. Clockwise, I see the kitty condo, and what is the word?
Exercise.
And then when I see the inflatable palm tree, what's the word? Stress release. I've got it. Now I'm done with that point. I leave the room. I know exactly where I am in my speech because that's where I am in my mental house. You see how this works? It sounds a little bit crazy, it absolutely works great. It absolutely works great. Now it's your turn, of course. You gotta practice this. The key thing is that you are creating 3D memorable images from your points, and you are attaching them to landmarks in rooms. That's how it works best. So let's skip the living room brain, and let's move over to the kitchen. In the kitchen, the first thing you see is your refrigerator. Now the point here, what was the point of the third room, do you remember? Hobby, yes. One of the ways of choosing a hobby is to look to the past. Look to the past. What did you do when you were a child? If you want to choose a hobby as a senior, look to the things you loved doing when you were a kid. So look to the past or childhood. So what you're going to do is tie look to the past or childhood to your refrigerator in some extremely vivid way that doesn't involve freezing babies. Which is what I did the last time, and my girlfriend said, oh no, that's horrible. But something like that. So I would like to ask you to find a different partner, and please create an image of look to the past or childhood and attach it to your refrigerator. You've got 2 minutes. Bring your attention back to me. Take your mind off the puzzle. Who would like to volunteer to share their image?
I've already done it.
We'll come back to you if no one else volunteers. Yes, please.
So I'm Greg from Walnut Creek Toastmasters. So we're in the kitchen, we're at the refrigerator door, and we have one of those digital frames that shows ongoing images. And we were thinking about those talking babies from the Super Bowl commercials a couple of years ago. So the baby is there holding a frying pan, but the baby is sexy because it has a drop door. And the little buns are shaking, and they're holding a pan and are saying it's time for you to cook something because their hobby is cooking inside the refrigerator.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. Was there any color involved?
The baby had a sunburned cheek.
I like it.
Half and half.
Have you ever done it before?
I haven't done it.
Please.
I am Suzanne Wilkins. I am from Word Weavers Toastmasters in Concord. So we were thinking about the idea of hobbies when you're young. And so I'm thinking about a hobby that I enjoyed when I was young, which was swimming. So I'm thinking of the refrigerator being like a big pool, and you could swimming from one section of another. Maybe the freezer is cold, so the water is cold when you're in the freezer part. You swim to the refrigerator part, and it's warmer. So that would remind me of a hobby that I did when I was young.
Terrific, thank you. Maybe one more. Yes.
So, Johan from Napa Toastmasters, so we were thinking of an old man in his underpants walking towards a fridge and then opening up the fridge and there's a black hole, and out of the black hole a younger self of him comes out, and the two of them fight and the younger one wins.
Thank you. It takes a little bit of practice. But as you do it, what happens is you get better and better at it. You get better at creating the images. You also get better at recognizing the image and then remembering what it was referring to. If it's a little bit hazy, it's not a good image. You have to go back to the starting board. But it actually does help jog your memory. And maybe the first time, like what I often do is I'll go back to my notes and I'll say, what was that image all about? I remember the black hole, but I don't remember what it was attached to, and then I'll go back and say, oh yeah, now I remember. After 2 or 3 times, you will have it. And that's actually not so true if it's rote memorization, where you might have to look at it 10 or 20 times. 2 or 3 times, you will have that image. Actually, this is a great time. Let's do some questions and answers. Yeah.
So just a quick one to understand for myself also. So what we're actually doing is we're just doing keywords. So especially when you walk into the room with the when you walk in with the pet. So the keyword just that you need to remember is companionship. The second keyword is exercise, and that's just your markers for yourself.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's not that your speech is following that. It's just for you, like underlining certain words, certain
Yes.
keywords.
It's markers.
Markers.
However, it depends on your memory. hopefully you know your speech pretty well, and you know your content, so that you don't have to put every word of your speech
Yes.
attached to an image. The
Yes.
first time I did this, I probably had 50 images because my memory was kind of weak. And so I attached everything to a word, but you get better. After a while, you just need the markers to keep you on track so you don't forget. And if you do forget, you just go back and you quickly notice it. And if you can't remember where you are, you'll remember the next image. At least you won't get too derailed,
Mm.
right? But honestly, you can put anything in a memory palace. Sometimes I will break down, for example, let's say you had a quote from Martin Luther King. Martin, I have a dream that one day our nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. Now, when I first memorized that, I couldn't do it. It was too long. I got lost somewhere. There was a lot of big words, creed and live out, whatever. So I attached every part of that speech, every part of that quote to an image. So I had an image with nation, I had an image with dream, with nation, with rise up, with live up. I broke it down into 6 images because that was a particularly tricky phrase for me. And so I gave it 6 images in my closet of my TV room. And then I got it. And then eventually it faded away and I got into my memory. But initially, it was very slippery. Now another thing you can add is transitions. Who here struggles with transitions, right? You may have all of the concept, but transitions are difficult. So you can put transitions in your memory palace as well. You probably put it in your hallway, connecting the 2 rooms. Earlier I said, for example, figuring I wasn't the only one. I did some research. My friend Google, figuring. I thought that was a great transition, but it's hard for me to remember in the moment. So I put figuring in the hallway, and there's a lot of ways you could have done it. You could have a giant fig, and you could stick them in the hallway, or you could have a beautiful figure like the ant, and maybe it's doing something in the hallway. I put the giant fig in boxing trunks and had him punching holes in the hallway and creating holes. Kind of crazy. But you can put transitions in there, you can put an entire quote, depending on how much level of detail, particularly if you're doing a speech about research with a lot of statistics, create an image. So it doesn't have to be just markers. It can also be as much detail as you need until you've memorized it. And then it'll all fade away and you don't need it as much. Any other questions? Yes?
So you gave us the example of how to do it in a home, but you said you can also do it like on a path to like the commute to work. So would like the landmarks be where you would?
It would be the landmarks you see as you go along. As long as you know your route so well, you would be all the landmarks you see. The difficulty there is you may not know 20 landmarks on your way to work. You might know the Burger King and so on. The other thing too is that sometimes there's some distance between driving to these various landmarks, and so it's easier when the landmarks are right next to each other, for sure. I don't really do that, but some people do. Any other questions? Let's go back in the corner there, and then come back to you.
Do you ever having problems with remembering stuff in your current speech, but the thing that you're looking at is from a different speech?
I thought that I would. And somehow or another, they start to create a sequence, and then I can remember them. And I haven't really had that problem, but I do change it up all the time. Like when I go to my office now and I want to do a new speech, I'm not going to include the ones I did before. I'm not going to include the latter. I'm going to include the little treasure chest. And I'm going to include, oh, I don't know, the copy machine and so on. So, and sometimes I'll do reverse order, just to change it up so it doesn't resemble another speech. But there's an infinite number. Sometimes I'll walk around my room as I'm creating my images and say, okay, what haven't I used for a while? What haven't I used yet? And I haven't had the problem of saying, in the middle of a speech, I suddenly start talking about companionship. That hasn't happened yet. It could. Any other questions? Yeah,
Do you just memorize it in your brain, or do you actually write it down or draw a picture on the paper?
It's up to you. I usually write it out. I will actually write out the landmarks, and then I'll say connect it to some points, and initially I'll have it on paper. I'll write the speech by hand, and then I'll take the key points and my favorite phrases, and then I'll create the images and I'll write them out, and then eventually I don't need it if I've done my job well. Some people have great memories. Who else? We only have like 2 more minutes. Yes?
So this really works for me, or it sounds like it's going to work for me. I'm a very visual person. Does this work for people that maybe are not visual learners?
That's a really great question. I don't know. I think that what I've discovered about this is that memory is like a muscle. You exercise it. It's not like intelligence, which maybe you're born with, but memory is a muscle that you can strengthen and you can work out. And so even the people who are not very visual can still manage to get good at this. But I think probably if you were very visual, it would be a little bit easier. It might be preference towards visual people, but you can absolutely get better at it. I'm sure of it. Yes?
Do you mind if I add something to your remark? Because I've actually studied this subject quite a bit.
Perfect.
So each person is, the three primary would be the kinesthetic, the visual, or the auditory. If they're not a visual learner, get them to make the auditory or the sound elements and jack that up.
Yes.
Or bring up their kinesthetic and make sure that there's a lot of action or movement or something else, so that way it will compensate for the visual nature of this exercise.
Terrific. Yeah. So in conclusion, and I'll take some questions afterwards. I want to wrap up so you have enough time for a break. In conclusion, Mark Twain once said, there are two types of speakers: the nervous and the liars. We all get nervous giving speeches, but it doesn't have to be pure agony. And I believe that this technique, for the right kind of person, maybe for everyone, can really work and take a lot of pressure off of you, so you're not using some sort of method that doesn't work with the way your brain naturally works. So the good news is you can get better, and I want to challenge you guys to try using the memory palace, not only for your next speech, but practice it. For example, try and use it the next time you're going shopping. Put your shopping list into a memory palace and walk around doing that. Don't knock anything over. But try and practice it wherever you can with any little small things, and then try it on a speech. And I think you'll find after your first or second or third speech that you couldn't possibly imagine doing a speech without it. Thank you.